Okay, so, this is really problematic. I believe the school has blocked, like, the camera. So I literally cannot use the camera. It has, like, a little icon that it shows, like, hidden content or whatever. So that's not my fault. Also, I'm recording this with my phone and I'm gonna edit the video and make an overlay so that you can see my face while looking at the PowerPoint as I scroll through it, as I'm screen recording the PowerPoint. If I can, I'm gonna try. So me looking here is about me looking at the audience. When I look back at my phone, it's probably me trying to get the glare out of my glasses. I would just take them off, but I can't focus without them, so yeah. So, my name is Chrissy Newsom, and I'm gonna be comparing and contrasting the rhetorical strategies of Henry, what's his first name? Oh my god. Thomas Paine and Patrick Henry's famous works, Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death, and Thomas Paine's Common Sense. In Patrick Henry's Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death speech, he is essentially opposing the ratification of proposed constitution. Now that is kind of not so straightforward, but essentially he's using powerful rhetoric to sort of convince influential, affluent, landed men of Virginia with much to lose to move past their current opposition against the British aggression that they're currently facing. This brings it to more of a treasonous opposition against the British, as Patrick Henry sort of aims for war as a result of his speech. That's kind of the goal that he wants, or at least seems to want, from my observation. Patrick Henry is in the photo here. Now, Thomas Paine's, his is, different. It's not a speech, for one. Essentially, his goal is literally for America to gain independence from Great Britain. And he does not want war to come out of that. He wants... It's sort of as if he's posing these benefits that are said benefits of being part of the British Empire. He's explaining them to be liabilities. Even cites unfair trade policies that relate to America's entanglement in Britain's foreign wars, and he does this in order to get that only one resolve that seems to be right, which is colonial independence from Britain. Now, Henry and Paine have some different purposes, but overall, it's the same idea. As I mentioned, Henry wants war. He doesn't just want that independence. He wants war because he feels as though nothing is going to change the way that things have gone, because due to the things that they've already tried, nothing has worked. Colonists must act against the despotism which the British present. That's pretty straightforward. He mentions liberty, freedom, and sort of references to slavery. Not necessarily the slavery that we are familiar with, but in some sense, slavery in his speech. And that's all to lead towards the purpose of him wanting to go to war with Britain. Now, Paine's is more of a, and this is something that I feel that is really, really big for Thomas Paine. Logic. He is very, very logical in his reasoning. Logos is one of the three main points which I've chosen for his rhetorical devices used. He's very logical. and he doesn't want to go to war through that sense. He just wants that self-governing feel, like to break away from Britain. And he shows this visibility of freedom from monarchy through his words, just to get this idea of rights from Britain. So the audiences between Henry and Paine are not very different, but they are different. He sort of spoke to powerful leaders more than a sense of speaking to the people. He's speaking to people of power, which are Virginian colonial leaders. He spoke in St. John's Church in Richmond, Virginia. That's where he first gave his speech, and that's not to say that he didn't give that speech at other times. That's just to say that that's where he initially gave his speech, and that was his intended audience from the beginning. Not to say that he didn't want to make it to the American people, but that was his initial projection. Now, Paine, on the other hand, I think was, more of a smart decision. He published his Common Sense book, 47 pages long. He published it in Philadelphia, and it was specifically made out to be to the people of early America, not just those leaders. Yes, the leaders, but not just those leaders. So I feel as though it made much more of an impact. Okay. So for the very first prominent rhetorical device, which I have seen in both works, in Patrick Henry's, it is repetition, both anaphors and epistrophes. He uses repetition a lot, especially in the beginning, I believe it was, of his speech. He mostly seems to use anaphors rather than epistrophes, and that's in the example. We have petitioned, we have remonstrated, we have supplicated, we have prostrated ourselves before the throne. This is him, mentioning that we have, multiple times. It's sort of like drilling the idea into the audience's head. And I really think that that's effective in grabbing their attention and persuading them to your side, as he is attempting to do. Now, Paine, on the other hand, rhetorical questions, I feel, is the number one, in some particular order, number one for Thomas Paine, in the excerpt that we went over in class at least. The example, but examine the passions and feelings of mankind. Bring the doctrine of reconciliation that hath carried fire and sword into your land. Now that ellipsis that interrupts really just throws the whole thing off. But giving the audience more of a clear interpretation of the content, in a way it's like answering your own question, but only to persuade the audience to your side. So, in him speaking about a topic, and he asks these questions, they're not meant for him to answer. They're not, anyone to answer, though he does answer them himself, and that also adds to the persuasion which he's trying to do. They both, once again, have this very similar goals, basically the same goal with different outcomes. They both want freedom from Britain. Now, in comparing repetition and rhetorical questions, they are very similar. Most of the time in these quotes that I've used, well, not necessarily the quote that I've used, in other quotes within both texts, you will see repetition and rhetorical questions being used in the same examples. So it's really like not uncommon for them to be together. And once again, they had the same goal. Now, the second rhetorical strategy that I've chosen here, that is, second most prominent, or however you want to take that, Henry's, and this is kind of swapping it. Henry's would be rhetorical questions, and that's, like I said, rhetorical questions and repetition, they're pretty similar and used in similar circumstances, so it's not a crazy idea that he would also use rhetorical questions. I mean, I believe he did in the example that I showed for repetition. The example, what have we to oppose them? Shall we try argument? Sir, we have been trying that for the last 10 years. Have we anything new to offer upon the subject? Again, the convincing, this is literally just his way of showing the audience that war is the only solution, because they've already tried everything that there is to try other than war. So if they want this independence to govern themselves, they need to go to war. That's what he's suggesting here. Now, in the second rhetoric sense, Paine, his would be pathos. He didn't prominently use pathos, and this section is in no particular order. Example, but if you say you can still pass the violations over, then I ask, hath your house been burnt? Now, there was multiple questions which he asked in this, but, I shortened it to make it not so long in the actual text. He mentions, house burning, property destruction, not having food or shelter, losing loved ones, and all to invoke emotion, and in him appealing to that emotion, he is drawing the audience in. In comparing rhetorical questions and pathos, they both have this sense of a planned effect. Rhetorical questions are meant to be more powerful and ignite that feeling like, let's do something about this. Like, any sort of powerful speech. Example, Patrick Henry's "Give me liberty or give me death," used here. It is definitely used to invoke that very powerful feeling, and those rhetorical questions definitely add to that. And then pathos is just emotion in general. Normally it's more of a sad or a sympathetic emotion, or empathetic. Yeah, but they definitely correlate in that way. Other than that, though, they are pretty different, besides the fact that rhetorical devices in general, most are very flexible. For the third rhetorical device, for both, which I have observed are most prominent, and I do think Paine should be a little higher up the logos on this one, but Henry's, the third one, would be illusion. I do feel as though the illusion wasn't so prominent that it was like really, really out there. The example that I've chosen is kind of difficult to decipher, more than kind of. Only someone with biblical knowledge would have understood the example, which is, suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. He meant to allow the audience to tie something greater to the words which are used. This allowed the audience to connect with the words, instilling them into the mind through the mentioning of the Bible. And essentially what he's referring to in this illusion, what makes it an illusion, because an illusion is when there is kind of like a reference made to something famous, usually like a work of some type of movie or something like that, something that a lot of people would know. Now this in itself, as I mentioned, is a biblical illusion. Suffer not yourselves to be betrayed with a kiss. What he is referring to here is the event from which Judas betrayed Jesus Christ with a kiss in the Bible. And I feel during the time that this speech was given, that would have really made an impact on the audience. Now, logos, as I mentioned previously, is very, very prominent in Paine's work in general. We may as well assert that because a child has thrived upon milk, that it is never to have meat, or that the first 20 years of our lives is to become a president for the first 20. For the next 20. Sorry. Um, this example here, I specifically chose this example to display how he uses his logic to display what he's talking about. Now, if we go to the comparison, illusion, I feel, doesn't relate to logos very much, aside from the fact that they are flexible, as I previously mentioned. But I do think that it really, really ties into ethos, as illusion is, kind of like referencing something. Ethos is crediting something. So I definitely made that connection there. But logos, I don't really see a crazy connection there, other than the way that these rhetorical devices impact the audience through emotion. Now, the effectiveness, I think personally that Thomas Paine's common sense definitely gives more of an impact and an effect rather than Patrick Henry's give me liberty or give me death. And I think that because, they both had this very clear usage of rhetorical devices, they both used them very well. But Thomas Paine's, especially in the way that he used logos, it feels more sensical to me. It feels more logical, because it is. He tied in inalienable rights. He attacked politics and economics in his words. Not necessarily through the excerpt that we reviewed, but in other parts of the common sense. And afterwards, this, I believe, led to the Declaration of Independence draft. That's how important that this really is. And I do feel his is higher than Patrick Henry's give me liberty or give me death, on the impact scale at least. Because Patrick Henry, it's like between the idea of giving a speech in a public place, not necessarily public, to people of power, like, we need to do something about this, standing strong, speaking your mind, being clear with it, versus being sensical about it, taking your time to go over what you're talking about in 47 pages. To summarize, Patrick Henry's Give Me Liberty or Give Me Death was, and Thomas Paine's Common Sense were both very, very similar, I'd say. I think that's why they're kind of paired for this, because they're seen as very similar, powerful rhetoric influentials. The rhetoric usage is very clear and concise and really impacts what's going on. It really displays what each author is trying to prove and show. And once again, the impact of common sense alone is really, really great for the time.